is August 29th, 2019. I am Jason Wimer, and I am interviewing Jason at the Newkirk Public Library, Newkirk, Oklahoma. I'm a member of the Newkirk 4-H Go-Getters, and this is for the Oklahoma Military Hall of Fame project. So, what motivated you to join the military?
The motivation for me to join the military was a long line of family members. Every generation has had a military member, all the way from the time that we came over to my father, his father, and before. So I felt like each one of our family members needed to join. I waited until later to join, but I joined anyway.
So tell me a little bit about your basic training.
I joined in 2000 and left early in 2001. Initially I left in 2000, got there and they brought me back 4 times because they didn't have a slot for me. So they kept bringing me back and putting me on recruiting duty. So finally when I got to boot camp in 01, it was pretty interesting because I was one of the oldest cadets, as you could say, one of the oldest Marines there. At the time, my head hat was only 2 weeks older than me. So I took a lot of verbal abuse, and you know, they made me understand it was a young man's game and I was going to have to get used to it. But it made me stronger.
So, what was your primary job after training?
I've had 9 different MOSs in the Marine Corps. I started out in fabric repair. Basically, I built tents and parachutes. That was my initial job. Then, a year and a half after that job, the Marine Corps got rid of that MOS, and I moved over to Motor T, and I became a mechanic. And for that time, for the next 16 years, that's what I did.
Where were you deployed? Where were you deployed?
I had multiple deployments. I went to Iraq in 05 and 06. 07, I was in Africa. 05, 06, I was in Fallujah. Quite an interesting time over there then. 07, I was in what they call the Horn of Africa. It was a small country out there called Djibouti, which is right in between Ethiopia and Somalia and right across from Yemen.
What was the most demanding part about your deployment?
The most demanding part was we were going 24/7 with no days off. We were working 20-hour days, and most of the time we were sleeping on the ground. Or if we could find an abandoned house that night, we would sleep on some concrete and actually have something other than sand or dirt to sleep in. I would say the most, other than the lack of sleep deprived, the most physical was the fact we walked on the average of probably 20 miles a day there with full gear on. My average gear weighed about 185 pounds that I was carrying on me when we were doing all this walking.
So where did you serve the majority of your time in?
The majority of my time was spent on the East Coast, either between Camp Lejeune or going to independent duty stations and teaching Marines their MOS and teaching them their jobs and how to perform their jobs in a deployment environment.
What rank are you most proud to have earned and why?
I would have to say Staff Sergeant was probably my greatest achievement. It's one of the hardest to get in the Marine Corps. You have to actually be awarded that because with that you become a staff non-commissioned officer. And they say out of the Marine Corps, only 6% of the Marines that ever join the Marine Corps become staff NCOs.
Which medals are you most honored to have received, and why?
I would say my Joint Service Accommodation Medal and my Navy Accommodation Medal. Those were probably two that I'm proudest of, and those were both given to me for deployments, for my hard work and dedication to my job.
Tell me about some of the special people you met.
In my time in the Marine Corps, I keep in touch with 4 people. All of them at the time were very, very close to me, and to this day I still talk to 3 of them at least every other day. One was a gunnery sergeant named Carl Rosso, the other was a sergeant named Batista, and the other was a fellow staff NCO by the name of Paul Newhouse, and we all 3 still communicate daily.
What was the best and worst military food you were served, and why?
The best military food would have to be DFAC 2 in Fallujah, Iraq. Hands down, it was the best meals you'll ever get. Any type of food you could think of was always on that buffet every day. And I asked them eventually why they always had the best food, and they said because they never knew if you were going to get another meal or not. And on Sundays, you got steak and lobster, if we could make it back on Sundays. So about every 3 weeks, if we could make it back to base, we always made it on a Sunday evening so we could get steak and lobster and ice cream, because that was the only days they served it. But the worst meal would have to be either the vegetarian MRE or the egg MRE. They were the worst. All the others are pretty good.
Tell me a funny story you experienced that could only happen in the military.
Funny experience. Being a Marine, some of the other branches don't know how to take us because they say we're very hot-headed. We don't work well with others. One time I was on McConnell Air Force Base and I was walking down the sidewalk and I was trying to go to the PX to get something to drink. And as I'm there was a couple airmen walking towards me. And as I get closer to them, they go way around me as like I had something on me. And they were acting like something was wrong. And I'm like, what's wrong, guys? And they look at me and like, why are you actually speaking to me? Are you going to hurt me? And I looked at them and I said, no. Well, we heard all you jarheads are mean. And I said, only if provoked. And they said, well, no, we're not going to provoke you in any way, shape, or form. And I said, okay, then get back on the sidewalk. And I kept on walking. And I had to chuckle for about the next 3 or 4 minutes as I walked into the PX. But that was one of the funniest things that's ever happened.
How did your military experience affect your life today?
A lot of ways. When I started my new job after getting out of the military, I walked in and my office area was in complete and utter disarray. So I literally go get the biggest trash can I can find and I start throwing things away. And the people start coming up to me saying, what are you doing? I said, a person cannot work in these type of environments. And they said, you can't be throwing all this away. And I said, well, if it was very important to you, you wouldn't be leaving it laying around and it would be well taken care of and put somewhere that it needed to be, whether it be on a shelf, a bookshelf, or these papers would be filed. Until then, you can come over here and pick them up, but I'm throwing them away. And so I cleaned that whole office that day. That afternoon, my boss walks in and goes, "What happened to all the stuff?" I said, "I threw it away." He looks behind me and sees the trash can completely full. And he goes, "You shouldn't have done that." And I said, "I cannot work in a pigsty." He goes, "Oh, the lady that we have working with us started chuckling because her son was also a Marine and had walked in there one day and seen that and said, 'Boy, if you ever hired anybody from the military, they would never let that happen.' And she had to start chuckling because they hired me." I walk in, I literally said, "Where's the Clorox wipes? Where's this?" And I am cleaning. And I cleaned my whole cubicle in about 30 minutes. And for the next 3 weeks, they were trying to find all their stuff that they had packed around somebody else's cubicle, not their own.